A chimpanzee spends about 6 hours a day chewing. You spend around 30 minutes. That gap, 5.5 hours handed back to you every single day, didn't come from evolution improving your teeth. It came from fire. Somewhere over 1 million years ago, a human did something no animal had ever done. They cooked. And it rewired what a human being could become. Now you probably think you cook for obvious reasons. Food tastes better, hot. Cooking kills the things that make you sick. Both of those are true. But neither one is why ancient humans first started doing it. The real reason is buried in your body, in the size of your teeth, the length of your gut, and the 3 pounds of tissue sitting behind your eyes reading this right now. Because cooking isn't a lifestyle, it's the thing that made you human. Let's go back about 2 million years. Something strange starts happening to our ancestors. Their teeth get smaller, their jaws get weaker, their stomachs and intestines start to shrink. On paper, every one of those changes is bad news. Smaller teeth, less bite. Weaker jaw, harder to eat. Shorter gut, less food processed. In a world full of things trying to eat you, you'd expect an animal like that to die out fast. Instead, it did the opposite. At the exact same time, the body was shrinking. The brain was exploding. It nearly doubled in size. This creature even has a name. We call it Homo erectus, the first of our ancestors that looked from the neck down basically like you. So here's the puzzle. How does an animal get physically worse at eating and smarter at the same time? What was feeding a brain that big while the equipment for eating was falling apart? To understand the answer, you have to understand what a problem raw food actually is. Look at a gorilla. It shares almost all of your DNA, but it spends most of its waking life chewing. Not because it's lazy, because it has no choice. Raw leaves, raw stems, raw fruit. That stuff is tough, low in energy, and takes forever to break down. So a gorilla carries a gut like a giant fermentation tank, and it sits there for hours, grinding through enough plant matter just to stay alive. A gorilla doesn't eat lunch. A gorilla is always eating lunch. That was the deal for every large primate on Earth. Eat raw and you spend your whole day paying for it. Your ancestors were stuck in the exact same trap until they found a way out. But before anyone tamed fire, humans had already started cheating in a smaller way. They picked up sharp stones and sliced their food into pieces. They pounded roots and meat until it turned soft. In 2016, two Harvard scientists, Zink and Daniel Lieberman, put numbers on what that alone did. They found that simply slicing meat and mashing plants meant a person needed far fewer, far weaker chews to get a meal down. Processing the food by hand was already taking the workload off the teeth. That's part of why the teeth could afford to shrink. But cutting and pounding could only go so far. A knife makes food easier to chew. Fire makes food easier to digest. And digestion is where the real energy was hiding. Here's what fire actually does to food. And it's cleverer than it sounds. When you heat food, you start breaking it down before it ever reaches your mouth. Heat unravels the tight proteins in meat. It bursts the starch inside roots and grains. It softens fiber your teeth could never crush on their own. In other words, cooking does part of your digestion for you, on the outside of your body. Think of it as digestion you do before you swallow. A raw potato is nearly useless to you. You'd get almost nothing out of it. Roast that same potato and it becomes a real meal. Same food, same weight, a completely different amount of energy because the fire already did the hard part. And this isn't a guess. A researcher at Harvard named Rachel Carmody ran the experiment. She fed animals the same food two ways, raw and cooked, and measured what happened. The ones eating cooked food pulled more energy out of it and gained more weight from identical ingredients. Cooking wasn't changing what they ate, it was changing how much of it they could actually use. Now here's where it gets interesting, because this is the trade that built you. Two of the most expensive organs in any body are the gut and the brain. Both of them burn enormous amounts of energy just to keep running, and there's only so much energy to go around. In 1995, two scientists, Leslie Aiello and Peter Wheeler, laid out the idea. If something let our ancestors shrink one of those expensive organs, it would free up a huge amount of fuel for the other. Cooking did exactly that. Once fire was doing part of the digesting, the body no longer needed that massive fermentation tank gut. The gut got shorter, and all that saved energy got spent somewhere else, on the brain. So the trade was simple and staggering. We gave up the big gut. We got the big brain. You are, quite literally, running on the calories your ancestors stopped spending on digestion. That's the real reason they started, not flavor, fuel. And once that trade was made, there was no going back. Look at yourself. For an animal your size, you have a tiny mouth, small teeth, and a weak jaw, far weaker than any ape. There's even a specific mutation in the human line that shrank the muscles that used to power a heavy bite. Your gut is short, your stomach is small. Every part of your eating equipment was scaled down on the assumption that something else, the fire, would handle the heavy lifting first. You are not built to eat raw. You are built to eat cooked. That's not a preference, it's written into your anatomy. So, when did it start? This is where it gets genuinely hard to pin down, and it's the same problem as always. Fire doesn't fossilize neatly. The oldest solid evidence of controlled fire comes from a place called Wonderwork Cave in South Africa around 1 million years ago. Burnt bone and ash, deep inside a cave where a wildfire could never have reached. But the body tells a different story. Those shrinking teeth and that growing brain start almost 2 million years ago, long before that cave, which is why some researchers argue cooking is far older than any ash we've found. That our ancestors were already cooking hundreds of thousands of years before they left behind a fireplace we could dig up. The evidence in the ground says 1 million. The evidence in your skeleton says almost 2. Just like a lot of the oldest human habits, the behavior came first. The proof caught up later. But you don't have to dig through caves to see how deep this runs. You can watch it happen today. In the 1990s, researchers in Germany studied a large group of people who had chosen to eat almost entirely raw. Not people starving in the wild. People in a modern country with blenders, olive oil, supermarkets, every possible advantage. And the results were quietly alarming. Many of them couldn't hold their weight. They were eating constantly and still losing it. And among the women under 45, roughly a third had stopped menstruating altogether. That's a signal the body only sends when it doesn't have enough energy to spare. Read that back. These were healthy people with every tool modern life could give them, and their bodies were reacting as if they were starving, on a full stomach. Because here's the part we forget. We are the only animal on Earth that cannot survive long-term on the food nature actually hands us. Every other creature eats what it finds. We have to change it first. So here's the full picture. 2 million years ago, our bodies started shrinking in ways that should have killed us. Fire stepped in and did our digestion for us, and everything followed from that one change. The gut shrinking, the brain swelling, the teeth pulling back, the jaw going slack, and all the energy we saved pouring straight into the one organ that would eventually take over the planet. By the time our species finally showed up, the decision had already been made for us. We were cooks before we were human. Now think about that chimpanzee again, chewing for 6 hours. Then think about your morning. You made a coffee, you dropped bread into a toaster. Maybe you fried an egg. It took a few minutes and you didn't think about it once. But that quiet little habit is the single most important thing your ancestors ever did. Every meal you have eaten in your entire life was cooked. You have never met a human being who lives without fire because there has never been one to meet. Ancient humans didn't start cooking to make food taste good. They started because fire gave them more life out of every bite. We cooked, and it made us. The kitchen isn't a modern convenience, it's the oldest technology we have. And it built the brain reading this. If you want to go deeper into the studies behind all of this, every source is linked down in the description.